Hi, I'm Denise, and this is my studio. I am a registered SAORI studio in Peachtree City, Georgia, and today we are going to be talking about the loom parts on getting to know your loom. I'm going to be taking everything right out of the SAORI Self-Innovation book. You will find everything on page 22 of the purple book. It's what we call it in the shorthand because it's purple. I want you to understand that this video is not an effort to bypass this book. This book is invaluable. If you don't already own it, you should. There's no two ways around that. So this is just a little extra help in getting to know your loom and some other things about SAORI. So let's get started. Okay, so to start our tour, we're going to start at the back of the loom. And I'm going to be sitting on the floor for this just because it's easier for me. This bar is called our warp roller. This is where our warp threads will be wound around on a paper pipe because we're SAORI and will be fed from here. This is a very important piece, and it has some pieces, additional parts that we need to know about. On the SX, we have a cable brake. And I'm going to release it from the warp control pedal. Really, it is easy to release. There we go. That's this pedal right here. On a WX60, the pedal is going to be in the same place. It's just going to operate a little differently. This is our warp roller disc. On the SX, to accommodate the cable, it has a divot in it. On the WX, it has the rubberized gasket. On the far other side, this is our ratchet and praw. We also just call it the clip or the clasp or the latch. So I'm going to take this latch off, and we find this crazy little piece of metal in here. This metal is probably the single most important piece on this whole beam, because that tiny piece of metal keeps this beam from falling out. When I take it out of the way, I can slide the beam and take it off. You notice that on this beam, on this end, the post is longer than it is on this end, which allows us to put it, when we put it in, put the long end in first, slide it all the way in. Let's put a disc on here. And then the short end. Set that little piece of metal and your warp roller won't fall out. The latch is important. Anytime you're going to move your loom, you want to set your latch. Anytime you are winding a warp onto the warp roller, you want to set your latch. It allows you to turn the warp roller in one direction only, and that is to wind onto this bar. When you're weaving, you take this latch off, the warp control gets set, and on this one we're just going to wrap it from here, there. I've worked from the outside to the inside and reattached to the little screw on here. This will now hold my warp tight. With the latch off, when I release here, I can advance my warp threads forward, and we'll see all of that in a later video. Moving up from this bar, we have this beam here. This is our back beam. It's also very important because its purpose is to take the warp threads from here, which have got to come up, and turn them so that we go forward so that we have the structure to weave. Okay? So, we've gone from the bottom up to here. Let me get up off the floor now, and we're going to come around to this side, and right here we have our onboard bobbin winder. We're the only loom manufacturer in the world with an onboard bobbin winder. It's one of the few things that when you have, when you buy your new loom, you have to put on, but it's really very easy. And it turns nice and smoothly. Should this rubberized cord break, contact your dealer and they'll be able to get a replacement for you. This obviously is a shelf, and that's just the only thing it's called. Very important though, because it's a great place to put our bobbins and our scissors and other important paraphernalia. Underneath the shelf we have our heddle roller, and we'll look at that again more closely when we hang an inside set. I don't have anything hanging on this loom at the moment. This entire section, this entire piece of equipment, and I'm just going to take this out. This is called your beater assembly. And many people don't realize that it actually comes out, but it does. And it can be used as so that you can thread your loom, or thread your warp right at the loom. But it also is important if you get a squeak, you can get a drop of oil in there really easily, or a little bit of silicone. I'm just going to pop it back in. So the whole piece is called the beater assembly. Okay, this is your reed race. Say that 4 times fast. Reed race. This is what your shuttle's gonna slide across. This piece, I'm just taking this out a little bit further. This is your reed cap, and it does come completely off, and you will see that again in a later video when I show you how to use that as a weight on your shelf when you thread your ready-made warp at the loom. Coming to the front of the loom, we find another bar that looks very much like the one at the bottom. This is our cloth roller. So down there, it's your warp roller, because those are your threads that have never been woven before. And up here is your cloth roller, because by the time it gets here, you've woven cloth. You have the same kind of ratchet and prawl on an SX60, and the same ability to take that completely out if need be. If you have a WX60, you do not have this piece of metal, and you do not have that ability to easily take that roller out. You need to unscrew one of your side beams. Down here, I'm going to move down, we have our pedal cords. They are attached obviously to the pedal, and they will come up and attach to our harnesses so that we can open and close the shed. This is our cloth roller cords. Okay, the number one thing I see new SAORI weavers do is they will put their cloth cord right to here, and we'll show that again in a later video. But their cords, you always want to bring them over this beam, which is called your breast beam. I think that is pretty much a tour. Oh, one last thing. Let me get this out of the way. There's one other latch on our SAORI loom, and that's the one that is between the pedals, and it holds our loom closed. So we're back, and we have a ready-made, black ready-made cotton warp on the loom. And so now we're going to open the loom and show you some of the other important things to know about your loom. To open your loom, we're going to lean it back slightly. It doesn't have to be tilted way back, just back slightly. What this does is it moves the castle to the back of the loom. It moves that beater assembly we talked about earlier to the back of the loom, which helps to keep it from getting caught on that latch on the cloth roller. So I've got it tilted slightly back. I'm going to squeeze the back beam and the breast beam together, and with my foot reach to that little latch, open it, and just let it open. Okay? And now it's nice and open. If I ever do that and the threads are just way, way tight, okay, you'll notice that I have my latch set down here. If those threads are so tight that I feel like I'm going to have to push really hard to open it, I'm going to close it up again. I'm going to remember to take that latch open. And then I might even go to the other side of the loom. And the reason I would do that is because my warp control beam is here. And I'm just going to tighten this up a little bit somehow to show you what that would look like if that was too tight. Okay? So now here we go. I'm going to lean this back. Now you'll get a shot of me putting my toe right on that latch and opening it. And I go and I'm opening. Look how tight those threads are. If I try and push this loom open, I'm going to snap some warp threads. But I've taken the latch, it latches open. All I have to do is standing on this side is kick that warp release lever, and there it goes. I've got plenty of slack to open that loom. The other pieces that we were going to look at the loom right now, we have our reed. Our reed is the little slots are called dents, and we express the size of the reed in dents per centimeter. This is a 5 dents per 1 centimeter. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in 1 centimeter. If you are starting to freak out because I'm using metric terms and you grew up using inches, don't freak out. I was an inch girl too. Metric is actually a lot easier to use, and as long as you stay inside that one system, you'll be fine. 5 dents per centimeter. That's the size reed that comes with your loom. Hanging from that roller that we talked about earlier, now we have our harnesses. The harness is the entire, sorry about getting my fringe in the way there, this entire assembly is our harness. It is also known as a shaft. Okay, so if you hear somebody say they have a 2-shaft loom or a 4-shaft loom, they have 2 or 4 of the harnesses. The individual wires, which have tiny little holes in them, maybe I should put my fingernail behind there, maybe you'll see it better. Here, there you go. That tiny little hole is the eye. The entire piece of metal is your heddle. Okay? So your heddles are on your harnesses. Your pedal cords that we talked about earlier attach to the harnesses. Here's a quick little tip for you. On your pedals, each pedal has 2 holes, one in front, one behind. And each pedal, you'll notice here on both of them, the cord on my right pedal, the cord is in the back hole, and in the left pedal, my cord is in the front hole. If I take that cord and attach it to its equivalent harness, okay, I have the cord that is going through the back hole, coming up and attaching to the harness that's in the back. And on the other pedal, it's the cord that's at the front, and it's coming up, and it's attaching to the harness in the front. Will it make a difference in your weaving? No. Nobody's going to be able to tell. So why is it important? It has to do with the geometry of the loom, and it will just make your loom run smoother if you attach the back one to the back and the front one to the front. It's also a good way of making sure that you've actually attached one pedal to each harness, because they're not going to open a shed if you have both pedals attached to only one harness. Trust me, I know. So, a couple other things before we leave the loom and move on to taking your inside set off. So on this loom, when I set it up, when I opened it, I added a bunch of extra slack. And so now my tie rod, my clipping tie rod, is all the way at my breast beam. And my beater assembly, when I pull it forward, is not. It's going to have all this extra room, and I may not want all that extra room. I want to start weaving right at the edge of my tie rod. Well, how am I going to get back there? Remember that your warp is held in tension by the contrast between this latch and whatever is holding that back beam secure, which is either your latch or your warp control lever. In this case, it is only the warp control lever. When I want to advance my cloth forward, and you'll see that in a later video, I release here and I roll on this and my threads come forward. So now I've advanced too far. To go the other direction, I'm simply going to do the opposite. I'm going to release the latch here. I'm going to come to the back of my loom. On the SX, it's very important that you release the tension off this cable. If you don't, you're going to wind up scoring that wood disc, and then you're not going to hold tension at all. Release this cable and wind it back on. Set that back on. Put that latch back. Tension it down. And now I can start weaving right up against my tie rod. While we're talking about the tie rod, and I'm going to grab a chair here. You'll probably see this several times in these videos, and I'll try and mention it every single time. With a clipping tie rod, a couple of important points. When you go to finish and to set it up, your spline, that flat piece that has gone into the clipping tie rod, always ends towards you. So you see here is the spline, the rounded part is back here, and the pearl knot, this part, this little bump, is always up. You don't want it looking like this. Let's put a great big X on that. That's the no. This is the yes. Okay? And that way it holds the tie rod nice and tight. Okay, so earlier we talked about what the warp beam and the back beam and how it was going to change the direction of your threads. And here you can see the warp threads coming off the warp roller. Important, they're coming off on the pedal side of the warp roller. They come up and they change direction so that we can come through our heddles and our reed to this side, and we are ready to weave. Isn't that pretty cool?